I know, okay. Oh, wow. Okay, here too. No, it's really good. San Diego, he's from San Diego. I like
Barack suspension, and I really believe this. I think the legislature looked more about that. So as I was,
That's not that I drink afterwards. You're here until tomorrow, right?
she's like, hell yeah.
Okay. I'll be here. I'll be here tomorrow too. So
it'd be helpful to do some kind of housing like that too.
Pardon? That's right. Political landmine. Stay safe.
Right.
All right, I'll give you a minute, 30 seconds to get see. All right, Chancellor.
Thank you, President Baca, members of the board, and we'll turn to Patrick Perry, who's going to give you an update on access. Patrick?
Okay, thank you. Eric Skinner gave us an update on the implementation of the student success portion of this. I'm going to give you an update on the access portion of this. One thing I wanted to say beforehand is you cannot decouple access from budget because the two are very highly correlated. And budget is something that we as a system do not have absolute full control over. So know also that access follows that statement. The materials I'm going to be referencing are also behind the student success task force recommendations here. The first page talks about funding reductions, and probably the two most noteworthy things to show there are recession era cuts reduced total system funding by 12%, 18% lost in purchasing power. So here's what happens when the system loses that kind of money. If you turn to the next pages, there's four metrics here, four things that we look at to measure student access. We look at the number of course sections that are offered in the system. We look at the system workload metric, which is FTES, full-time equivalent students. We look at the unduplicated head count in our system. And we look at participation rate, which is the number of students in the system divided by the number of residents in the state. So if you turn the page, we're going to look at the status of these four metrics. As budgets go down, campuses and districts have an FTES target that they attempt to hit. They do not wish to go over it, and they certainly do not wish to go under it. FTES targets generally go lower when budgets are shrunk. There's about a 1-year lag in this, and ultimately the only lever a campus has to deal with in order to hit that FTES target is the number of course sections that are put on in the system. So if you look at the number of course sections offered there in Table 1, the 4 bad years we had there are in yellow. And we went from a high of 388,000 course sections offered in a system. 4 years later, we were at 329,000. So 12% loss of budget, 25% loss in the number of available course sections to students in the system, which is pretty dramatic. You can see this past year, 13-14, we have a preliminary number sitting here, and things are starting to turn back. So we got a pretty significant increase in the percentage of course sections offered, but I'll show you what that ultimately will translate into as we grow. FTES in the system, which is the workload metric, has also gone down approximately about 12% drop in FTES over the course of 09 to 13.
Patrick, if I can interrupt for the board, I think it's really important you hear those two figures he gave you, a significant drop in those course sections, a lesser drop in FTES. What that meant was faculty saw class sizes go from on average 27 up to about 31 or 2. So in other words, the faculty and staff absorbed a huge burden of added students. The state made out like a bandit. So they cut the budget dramatically, and the faculty and staff carried the load to minimize the impact on students.
Yep, and we certainly saw that students sitting in the hallways attempting to get into a section during that period of time. Table 3 shows system unduplicated head count. Unduplicated head count is the total number of students who attended at least one course in our system at any campus anywhere in a particular year, in any term in a particular year. Our peak enrollment was in 08-09. We were at 2.678 million. By the time the 4 bad years of budget had concluded, we were down to 2.084 million in headcount. So we lost about 600,000 students, which, by the way, is more students than CSU and UC have combined. So that is the magnitude of what we're talking about. The students who we generally lose in downturns like this are single course takers and first-time freshmen. These are the folks who have the least enrollment and registration priority. They are last on the list to who gets a course. The courses fill. They can't get a course. And so a lot of students are just simply unable to enroll in a single course. Finally, table 4 here is participation rate. In the past, we've targeted 90 to 100 as an ideal participation rate. What total number of students in the system who are divided by the total residents in California between ages 18 and 70. We also tend to want to focus on the 18 to 24-year-old range. But you can see what participation rate, what occurred with that metric. We went from just shy of 90 to just shy of 75. So participation goes down. Unfortunately, you lose almost a full generation of high school graduates who just have a really hard time getting a course at the time that they need to get it. Some of them eventually show up later on. Some of them do not, which is very unfortunate. So that's a quick overview of where we're at as far as access. And I'll be glad to take questions.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. We'll turn to Keitha. Keitha, would you provide a little bit of a perspective on the other kind of money?
Can I ask a question?
Yes, Member Avalos?
Yes. Patrick, question on the courses that came back. It seems like there's courses, about 20,000 courses are coming back in this year. Do we know what kind of courses are coming back? Do we have a sense of that? Do we have an idea of, are there courses that are applicable to today's workforce? Or, how is that determined?
So we have the ability to show exactly what courses came back looking at what's called the top code, the taxonomy of program code of which courses, before and after. We haven't done it for 13-14 data because literally we just got this figure about a week ago. So we are able to do that, and I'm sure we will do an analysis of what they put on.
What we asked the colleges, I think it's a great question, was to try to, as they rationed education, to try to take avocational and personal development courses out first. Unfortunately, the cuts were so deep that all the programs did suffer some reduction. But what we hope to see in the numbers Patrick's talking about is that as the courses are added back, they're added back in CTE, basic skills, and transfer education.
Vice President Bond?
I just also had a question about, it's just still so dramatic that we're at 2.5 million unduplicated people, and then last year we were down to 2 million. So is anybody studying what actually happened to that 500,000 margin now too? I know we don't always have answers, or that populate going from 90% participation to 75. Is there a demographic answer for some of it, or do we just have fewer college-age students today, or?
We can. There is a study in there, yes, and there is an analysis that we can do to look at what's the change in demography, who did we lose. We lost students generally on the tails. You lose a lot of older students and students taking single courses, and you lose a decent chunk of younger students who have no enrollment or registration priority. Those students who are already in the system and got in before this stuck around in the system.
Right. So I'm interested in what happened to those 18 to 20, like somebody who's 22 today that graduated high school in 2010. What happened to them?
There's technically a way we could do that, because if we went into our applicants file in CCC apply, we could look at all the students who applied but did not enroll. You'd want to give it a few years and see, okay, can I find them anywhere else in higher ed anywhere? Run them against the National Student Clearinghouse. Did they go to University of Phoenix? Did they go to for-profit? If not, can I track them into the labor force? And did they just attempt to enroll and continue working and never come back to us ever again? Probably a good study to look at, 5 to 10 year time period.
Yeah, it's just, if anybody's studying it, I think it'd be interesting for us to keep our eye on.
I think it's a worthy study.
Anyone else?
Just to add one anecdotal piece to everything Patrick said about the for-profit colleges, et cetera, that did very well at the times that we were being reduced, is that I read an article about 2 years ago that said that there were 1,100 California resident freshmen in the ASU freshman class 2 years ago. And I think that says a lot about our system, that it's our loss was the gain of a lot of other states as students found access in other states and ways to get through their system in 4 years.
Yes.
On that same point, the Corinthian colleges are having a lot of trouble. Are we seeing an impact on the California community colleges as a result of that?
Not yet. We have been in contact with the U.S. Department of Education, and they've provided us with the numbers and the locations of those students. And in fact, we have another conference call with the U.S. Department of Education slotted in another week or so, because we do believe that if those colleges really completely close, that we're going to try to migrate as many of those students who are up into a program into a similar program in one of our institutions, if that's possible. It won't be easy, but we've committed to the U.S. Department of Education that we'll try to save as many students as possible in that process.
Member Lansky?
Just a comment. Isn't there some effort on the part of the Carrington colleges to reach out to take the Corinthians?
Yes, there are other proprietary for-profit organizations that are considering buying them, but what they are likely to do is cherry-pick the ones that are most profitable and
That's a good point.
Kick out the students in the other ones.
I did have a question. You reminded me when you were talking about the Tidal Wave 2 group. If all those students, all those young people decided they wanted to go to community college, how quickly can we grow? And the reason I ask, I know in the medical world, we don't want to grow more than 12% a year because we know we can't handle it. Or is it just all limited by the money and we can only grow a small amount because we only have a certain amount of money?
It really is directly related to the funding. So a college that is given 1 to 2% more funding for courses, for access, will tend to add at least that many courses, maybe somewhat more. And so if you look, we grew about 1%, didn't we, this year, Patrick? Yeah. And we're likely to see a 2 to 2.5% growth next year. So it will start to come back. And there are a couple of downward pressures. The high school graduation rates are flattening out. They're not going down, but they are flattening out. And as the economy improves and people go back to work, that provides a little bit of a relief. The corresponding upward pressure are the increasing education requirements for all kinds of employment. So more and more people need an education. So I think you're still likely to see, and that's why we think the system ought to have 3 million students in it by 2025. If we had the funding to accommodate the students and you kept that, and you got that participation rate back up closer to 1 out of every 10, as opposed to where it is now, then you'd see about 3 million students. But it is solely dependent on the ability of the state to afford the courses that are necessary.
And what happened to those experimental programs? I know Long Beach City College did one where the students paid the full fee. Did that just quietly end, or are they still doing that robustly around the state?
They are I think, still the only one doing it, aren't they, Pam? I think that's right. And we haven't had a full cycle to evaluate them. They are responsible for providing us a evaluation of those. I think we're supposed to get that this fall, aren't we?
Okay.
The first
so
pilot?
That's certainly not filling a gap.
No.
It's just one school. Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Chancellor?
Ethan?
Great. Thank you, Chancellor Harris. Good morning. So the Foundation for California Community Colleges, we are the official nonprofit supporting the Chancellor's Office and the Board of Governors. So our mission and our priorities are your mission and your priorities. So we are here to support statewide initiatives and priorities. I'm going to point you in your book to the tab that's labeled External Financial Support. And there's a brief report in that section that focuses on two major areas that we've been focused on over the past 3 to 5 years as it relates to system-wide priorities. Our total budget is about $30 million a year, and that is made up of a wide array of programs and services that we operate at the foundation. And so there's just two of those that are highlighted here, but two that I think are really important to the conversation that we're having today, and that's student success and workforce development. And over the last 3 to 5 years, we've successfully raised about $5 million, one in excess of $5 million on each of those initiatives. In the area of student success, you'll notice there's a laundry list there of different funding initiatives that make up the $5 million. And what we really aim to do is to try to attract a very diverse stream of funding for these initiatives, so we're not reliant on any one funding stream. And we try to find that niche between what are the system priorities, what are funders interested in funding, and what are core competencies of the foundation where we can successfully operate a program or otherwise support the work of the Chancellor's Office and the Board of Governors. So in student success, we were involved from the very beginning. We helped raise about $550,000 that supported the task force activities, and so those were that was funding to hire an executive director that led the effort, Amy Supinger. That was funding to fund all of the convenings to bring everyone together, and that work ultimately produced the task force recommendations that you heard Eric and Patrick talk about earlier. Immediately following that work, we then named Student Success as kind of our flagship fundraising initiative. So that was the thing that we started to pour through the 20-plus recommendations, and then again try to find that center point of what are funders interested in, what are our core competencies, and how do we help forward the work that's already happening through these recommendations. You'll hear more about the Step Forward Priorities Project. Vice Chancellor Paul Feast, I think, is going to show a video on that. That is a philanthropically funded program from the Kresge Foundation. It was a student awareness campaign to help students understand what the new rules are so that they can maintain priority registration. Several of these funding streams are really around forming partnerships and creating a hub so that other organizations and the alphabet soup that is the California Community Colleges that are out there also promoting student success, providing a platform for those organizations to come together, hear a bit more about what each other is doing, and make sure that we're all working together on a common front, moving the same initiatives forward. And we find that to be really, really important work. You heard Vice Chancellor Michalowski mention the Student Success Center. That was another generous grant from the Kresge Foundation. We're very happy to have Paul Steenhausen on board, and this is a really great project because it really illustrates the synergy between the foundation and the Chancellor's Office. So we were able to bring Paul on board through philanthropic funding. He's an employee of the foundation, but really his day-to-day work is working directly with the Chancellor's Office, with Patrick Perry and the Vice Chancellor group at the Chancellor's Office to, again, be that hub, create that hub, share best practices, and really accelerate the work that's already being done at the statewide level. We've also worked with the Chancellor to raise money for leadership development. So there's seed funding that's come in from the Hearst Foundation of about $150,000, and we're continuing that work to find other funding streams and partnerships to help create additional leadership development opportunities for our college presidents. In the area of workforce development, so I talked about student success and about how we leveraged really the momentum of the framework that was created through the Student Success Task Force and those recommendations. So when we looked at the work that we're doing around workforce development and the work that Vice Chancellor Bonton Quinlivan is doing with the Doing What Matters with Jobs in the Economy framework, it was really important to us to try to marry the work that we had already been doing really since our inception. We've been running a student internship program since our inception in 1998, And as the new framework, the Doing What Matters framework, came about, it was really important us to make sure that the work that we were doing is aligning with the work of the Chancellor's Office. So we've been quite successful in leveraging additional philanthropic funding to help create that marriage and to create even greater synergies between our historical work and the new focus at the Chancellor's Office. The work that we're doing now is not only helping to better align our existing student internship program, but it's also helping to engage more and more employers to create more student internships. We're creating a technology tool to be sort of the match.com between students who need work and employers who want to employ student interns. And then we're also partnered with the Link Learning Alliance to not only benefit our college students, but to also look back into K-12 and start to create more work-based learning experiences for high school students, so that when those high school students come to us, they're even more prepared around what the workplace looks like, maybe a little bit more prepared about what do I want to be when I grow up, and that will help them better navigate their college life. So we're really proud of the work that we've done around these two initiatives, and really very grateful for the relationships around this table, because when I talk about, kind of that synergy, it's what do we do well, what are the priorities, and what do the funders want to fund? The other piece of that is making connections. And so really, when I look at the funding streams that are here on this piece of paper, the vast majority of those funding streams came from introductions from around this table, either from Board of Governors members and or vice chancellors that are around this table, and those introductions are really, really important. Generally, if we can get an introduction to a funder, we can find something in that in that little circle of what we look for to bring in additional funding. So I think I'll stop with that and see if there are any questions.
Member Lance.
First of all, thank you very much, President Mills, for your presentation. I just wanted, this is more a comment than a question, just to say that Member Reed and I are the Board of Governors members on the Foundation Board of Directors, and one of the things that I found during the time that I've been a member of the Board of Directors has been how it's been so pleasing to see how much of the work of the foundation is geared to dovetailing with the mission and goals of the Chancellor's Office and for the system. And I just recently, for those of you on the board who don't know, the foundation has just adopted a 5-year strategic plan, and that document, again, dovetails with the system goals and also with the strategic plan that the system has adopted. I don't know if you would like to maybe say 30 seconds about the strategic plan, but I think that's one of the things that I find so heartening being on the Board of Directors is the fact that there's so much of a hand-in-glove working relationship between the foundation and with the Board of Governors and with the Chancellor's Office.
Thank you, Member Azumi, and thank you for your service to you and Member Reed on the Foundation Board. I will talk a little bit more tomorrow about the Foundation's strategic plan, but I will just say very quickly that it was a very inclusive process that included a broad range of constituent groups, including the Board of Governors. And as we put that strategic plan together, at the top of mind was ensuring that the alignment between what we're doing at the Foundation and the priorities at the Chancellor's Office and the Board of Governors, and we'll talk a little bit more about that tomorrow.
Member Belinsky. As we move forward with some of these initiatives, can I assume we will get more updates and what's happening, like, say, with the Kresge or this leadership or even the Link Learning Industry Align? I mean, it would just be helpful to hear more detail at a time when there's time to do that.
Yeah. And as you know, Keith traditionally makes a report to the board almost every meeting, and so we will provide more detail on those.
Do you have, maybe it's a sit down, or maybe you can send me something on foundations that have not given that you believe fit squarely into what we're doing here, that you can send me, because I might know folks there, board members, executive directors, and I'm happy to push.
Absolutely. And I would say vice versa, if there are foundations that you have relationships with that you would be willing to make an introduction, we would love to have that conversation.
Great. I have 5 or 6 in mind that I think.
Fabulous.
But you may already get funding, so we'll figure it out.
Perfect. Thank you.
Very good. Any other questions?
All right, thank you. We're going to move right ahead and talk a little bit about AB 1440, the Associate Degree for Transfer. Vice Chancellor Walker is going to bring us up to date on that. Pam?
Let me do the end first. So the fall 2014, our goal was to have 1,622 ADTs. And if you just come into these systems from a college and think you know all the acronyms, there are actually more acronyms than I'll ever know in my life. But the SB 1440, Student Transfer Achievement Reform Act, 2010, adopted significant numbers of faculty and staff and administrators on our campuses have been working over the past couple of years to do just an incredible amount of work. Having come from a campus recently, I know how much gnashing of teeth go on to get this work done, and I'm really proud of the people in the field who are doing it. As you read the update and implementation, probably the most important piece is this graph that I think you get on a regular basis from our chancellor. But as of an hour ago, our folks updated me to just let us know. When I left them on Thursday, we had 87% of our target rate was achieved. An hour ago, 88% of our target rate is achieved. The staff in the Chancellor's office is working so significantly with their colleagues in the field, and they are only 196 degrees away from completing that. I would say to you that people on campuses probably were really robust in thinking they could do more than 2 degrees. That was their minimum requirement. And so they really got busy and did that. As of today, though, 49% of our colleges, 49 of our colleges have reached their 100% goal. Others are just in the moments of doing that, but working with our colleges through our staff, we'll reach that goal. That's their job, and they know that they will hit it. But just let me give you the Associate Degree for Transfers is the ADT, and that provided that transfer pathway to CSU. Before all that, our course our courses were articulating through a CID process, and we had to do all of that through a transfer model curriculum, a TMC. So when I start to talk about the work that's been done, I would say hundreds and hundreds of people have been doing this, and we will see 100% completion by the end of this semester.
I would add for the board, when you look at that list, you'll notice we have about a dozen, maybe 15 institutions that are really lagging behind, and Vice Chancellor Walker, Deputy Chancellor Skinner, and I are doing personal outreach to try to help. Now, there's some legitimate reasons why some of the colleges are struggling, but we will, as Pam said, we'll hit the overall goal, but we also know that that we need to work with some of these individual colleges that are struggling. We intend to do that.
You know, this built on some pretty good foundation, and I want to recognize the Academic Senate, the Statewide Academic Senate, for the work they've done. David Marsh and Julie Ornstein are here with us this morning, but the work that laid out really propelled a lot of colleges to really kind of, to get it done, and it's great progress. Member Belinsky?
Is there any projection when some of the additional ADTs will get posted through the State Chancellor's Office? For example, the film and television one, because there was a top code issue, and the top code issue's been resolved.
They were having a robust conversation about that just the other day and getting that listed, so it's coming along.
There might be other ones with it? Or?
Yes.
Okay, good.
What does top coat mean?
Yeah, what is top coat?
Taxonomy of programs, and it's the way we code. I mean, Patrick probably could say it better than I can, how we code the nature of the subject matter of the area, and whether it's, like for transfer or CTE or...
Okay, yes.
So, yeah, it's a 6-digit code. It basically lays out, this is English composition.
Right.
Okay, it's a gradation of taxonomy of program.
Vice President Bond?
I just want to add that it's just so inspiring to see the progress that has been made, because this didn't exist 4 years ago.
Right.
And we had a system that was just not working for students, and thanks to the leadership in the legislature, Senator Padilla, of course, but then the system took it on. And I remember when Eric first came to us and we saw a blank grid, and he said, one of these days you're going to see it be mostly blue. And to see that has made it, and it's created a lot of momentum and also confidence, I believe, in the system. And thanks to our partners at the Cal State University who've embraced this as well, that it's one of those things, I think, when I mentioned last night, people will look back on how did you get such a massive change through the system. It's something that I feel very proud to have been part of, but really admire the leadership of the staff and the faculty and the other two systems for pursuing.
I think, too, just the Academic Senate, as Dr. Baca said, have just been an incredible push in having this happen, and just dealing deeply with their colleagues in the CSUs, UCs, and the other systems to do the articulation, set the pace. So they have really, they should get a real acknowledgement for that.
I know this is a rookie question, but how does this differ than the traditional, like, IGETC path into a CSU, and what are the benefits of going this route?
Well, I think that this route is, and I'm going to give you the rookie
Good.
response.
Please do.
So we're in it together. This route developed in agreement, different than a regular transfer degree, was that the CSUs would accept these students who completed these courses because of the articulation that was done course to course. Sometimes in our history, we would get someone completed, they would go to CSU, and then they might have to take another course or two that looked just like the course they took on the community college, because that's what CSU wanted them to do. Now we have sort of this universal path that says you don't have to retake those courses.
That's huge.
That's huge.
Huge.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the big one.
I get it.
Yeah, the thing is that the past two administrations, as this points to the leadership, we've had really good relationship with both Chancellor Harris and Chancellor Scott, with the other CEOs in the CSU and the UC. And that has really helped propel some of this discussion significantly, and it's still working to our benefit. Remember, yes,
I was just going to add to what she said, that this is the first time we've really had what's called program articulation rather than course-to-course articulation, such that a student then who completes the program successfully has all their general education at the lower division done, all their major prep at the lower division done, and they're ready to go to upper division, and they don't have to repeat anything, as she said, and they can complete in 60 units. So, I mean, it's very well defined that you cannot expect them to do more than the 120 units, and you have to accept these courses to fulfill all their lower division requirements in that major.
Member Reed, you had something to...
I was just curious as to where we stood with the UC, because I know Governor Brown spoke to this body about a year ago and indicated his interest in supporting the work with the UC system. I'm just curious.
Yeah, well, with both the UC and the privates, with the UC, of course, we're having conversations with the Office of the President, and I think it will be a little bit more time. I'll be as sensitive as I can about this. It's not sort of in the DNA of the UC to just automatically camp on something that the CSU has done. So there's some conversations that need to take place. So that's a time interest, but they have expressed an interest, and I think they really do. University President Napolitano has been meeting with our presidents up and down the state. She really does want to improve transfer, and I think that will happen. With the private institutions, we're working at the system level with the association leadership, and I think in that case it's likely to happen sooner rather than later. And I think what they'd really like to do, if they could make it work, is simply mirror the work that's been done with CSU. Now, as you can imagine, that's a very diverse system. It includes Stanford, and it includes small private liberal arts colleges up and down the state. So it's a huge system. And what they're yet to determine is whether we're going to have a sort of one-size-fits-all like the CSU, or whether we're going to have to develop some relationships with segments of their private institutions. But both of those are at this point only in the conversation stage. We don't have anything tangible to show you that's been done.
Vice President Baum?
Sorry, go on.
My last question just is, are we able to keep the promise to the students who get these degrees? Is there a spot for them at the Cal States once they do that? That's always my big concern.
No. No. I mean, we'd be kidding ourselves to say that the CSU is going to be able to take all these students. They simply don't have the seats. And I think it is a huge problem that's going to roll back on both us and the CSU. And Tim White and I have talked about it. I think what you're going to see in terms of numbers, Patrick, we have 5,000 in the first cycle. Yeah. I think you'll be able to see that double, triple, quadruple over the next few years. And at this point, I don't think the CSU knows where they're going to put those students. So it is a real problem.
Chancellor, could I just add on? I just wanted to clarify that to date, CSU has accepted all the students. The problem the Chancellor points out is going forward, capacity issues at CSU could present a challenge. But it's really a testament to the level of support from CSU that even during some of the recent years where their budget was cut and they weren't taking students generally, they still carved out space to take our students with associate degrees for transfer. So that was a real strong signal from the CSU about their level of commitment here, and a strong signal to students about how important these degrees are. The challenge that the Chancellor points out is very real, which is going forward, CSU is going to need the capacity to take these students when we move from 5,000 of these degrees up to 25,000, 35,000.
It's not a lack of willingness on the CSU. It's simply a capacity problem.
So that's where also the partnership with the independents is going to come in.
Right.
Yes. Huge.
Member Budnick?
I guess my only question is the course ID numbers that this bill helps streamline. Are these course ID numbers just for the courses that are outlined here that are being developed? Or are these course ID numbers of all courses throughout the community college system?
Linda is going to be.
CID for short it's a system, and it can accommodate many different kinds of courses. We've been funding it for a number of years through a budget line item for transfer support. And when SB 1440 passed, working with the Academic Senate, which actually operates the CID program, we put that resource to these specific majors. We kind of focused it here to make this program work. What we are in the process of doing now is expanding the CID system, linking the work that's done by the Academic Senate with the faculty to determine what are the comparabilities among courses, with the work being done at the Butte Technology Center on the Education Planning Initiative, the Online Education Initiative, so that we will do more community college course to community college course articulation, including CTE courses and some basic skills courses. So we kind of started with a concept that was focused on transfer courses. We invested it in making these degrees work, and now that system is available and being further developed and expanded.
So the incredible frustration that I found of having a kid transfer from the Los Angeles Community College District and having to go through math 21 to 28 to 101, who then goes to Pasadena City College, which is 10 miles down the road but not in the same district, and now it's English 950, 951, and so they're now going to become the same?
What's going to happen is both of those courses are going to have a supra number. So you can look at English 1. You can look at that course. It will have a CID of English 1 at the LA College, and it'll have a supra number of English 1 at Pasadena if it's a comparable course. and then those should be accepted by each, the colleges should accept those courses as comparable.
And is there huge pushback from the individual colleges to doing that, or not really?
Not really. I think there used to be, but I think, the time has come.
Got it.
I think everyone recognizes that we have to find those commonalities and make it easier for students.
Thank you.
Member Malumed?
Just to let you know, State Senator Brulte passed a law about this 2002, and it never really got done. So it just shows you the length of time it takes for things to change. But my question is, can you give us a sense of what percentage of courses are not yet aligned campus to campus? Are, the transfer ones we know. So I just don't have a sense. Is it 20% of all the courses are now all, or is it half? I just have no sense of that number.
Looking at total courses, I think it's a larger percentage than that.
Larger percentage than what? I don't.
Than 20. I think
Okay.
it's, I
So
think
a
the majority
third?
of courses are not yet aligned through CID, but it will increase. The numbers that are aligned will increase rapidly in the next year.
So you're saying about 2/3 of them are not aligned, a third of them are? I mean, just to give
More
me
than
a
half.
sense.
Any ideas, David?
I just don't have any. No.
And Julie.
But you have to remember that at this point, CID was developed for transfer courses.
Right.
So all of our basic skills courses, all of the CTE courses are not yet a part, although that is what we're working on
It's
right
coming
now.
next.
So,
So right now, that's where we're moving in that direction. I can't give you a percentage. I'm happy to look into it.
So it's small. I mean,
It's small but mighty.
okay.
That's
Okay.
the way to define it. because
Okay.
What we really are looking for are those courses that are comparable, that students are accessing frequently. We're always going to have those courses where it doesn't make sense to create a CID descriptor because they are more isolated incidences
Right.
within the colleges that students are
Right.
taking.
Right.
Those to create the student pathway to get them to where they need to go for their educational goal, those are the ones we're focused on.
Okay, thank you. That gives me a sense.
okay.
Chancellor? Oh, Member Van Loon?
Yeah, have we been able to identify some of the roadblocks our colleges face in developing these ADTs and reaching their target percentage? Because looking at the percentages, either they're really close to that 100% mark or anywhere in the 80% mark, or really low. And have we identified some of the factors that play into that? And what can we do as a board or as a chancellor's office to help mitigate that process and help bolster their percentage numbers up? Is there anything we can do?
Well, we've asked the chancellor to work on it.
Yeah, that's the individual outreach I mentioned earlier. We just need to talk direct. There are a myriad of reasons. Some of them, just the dynamics of the institution. They're focused on something else right now. They're challenged by something else right now. But as is the case, anytime you have a system as large and diverse as this, you're going to have some that are going to come along a little bit slower. But everybody is making progress now. There was a time where we had some institutions that simply weren't doing anything. But it is getting better, and we will see those institutions come up.
Anything else, Chancellor?
Thank you. We'll turn to Linda and ask her to give you an update on veterans.
Terrific. This is an exciting update to give you because this work has progressed beyond my expectations. And I actually have some new numbers to share with you that are very exciting. We have, California has the largest number of veterans in the nation, and the California community colleges are the first stop for many, many veterans returning from active duty. And we have historically received reports of the numbers of veterans drawing GI Bill benefits. We've gotten those reports, a snapshot, an annual snapshot from the Veterans Affairs, and we've also collected data from our financial aid offices asking how many students are drawing veterans benefits. And so we reported that in 2011-12, we enrolled 44,000 veterans. We've established some new data elements in the MIS system where colleges can collect information from students when they apply to college, and now they're reporting it to us. And one of those elements is veterans and active duty military. And we've just got numbers like last week that indicate that, in fact, it looks like we've got more than 61,000 veterans enrolled in our colleges, and an additional more than 9,000 active duty military. And I think that number is probably conservative because of some of the online programs that Coastline College and some other institutions are doing. So our need to serve these students is even greater than we knew. And the fact that we've been ramping up these programs is tremendously important for the ability of these mainly young men and women to return to California and to productive lives. When we talk to our counterparts at UC and CSU, not only are 75% of the students who are enrolled in public institutions attending a community college, but those veterans that are at UC and CSU are overwhelmingly transfer students from community colleges. At UC, there are virtually no veterans who come straight to those institutions. So our colleges are really doing the brunt of the work that is involved with the reentry of those individuals to civilian life. And, you know, as everyone has read, many of the veterans come home with significant challenges. So one of the first things that we did was seek out funding to help colleges better understand the needs of those returning veterans. And we were very fortunate to get a $75,000 grant from the Zellerbach Family Foundation in the Bay Area, which enabled us to develop a curriculum that has been presented at 13 colleges to a wide spectrum of faculty and staff, and at 6 statewide conferences that trains people in how to understand military culture, how to recognize the challenges that veterans bring to the classroom, how to be sensitive to some of the needs of those returning veterans, and to more effectively accommodate them at the colleges. So we've leveraged that grant to provide widespread training throughout the system. In addition, we were able to help to rapidly expand the number of Veterans Resource Centers in the state because we looked at the model that was developed at Butte College. And that Veterans Resource Center has been very popular with veterans and very successful. And one of the key features that they built into it, it's a place where the Veterans Benefit Certifying Officer spends their time, and where there are counselors. It's one full-time counselor who runs the center at Butte. And then there are some work-study students who are veterans themselves and who've learned the ropes and who help those coming after them to navigate the various bureaucracies around their veterans benefits. And also, one thing we've found over the years is that many of the returning veterans who come home with traumatic brain injury or other effects of their service would benefit from some of the adaptive equipment that the DSPNS offices have. But in many cases, they feel it's a stigma to identify as a student with a disability. So, the campuses were finding that many veterans were reluctant to go to the DSPNS office. So what Butte did was bring that adaptive equipment into the Veterans Resource Center. And so there are special computers with with special software, Kurzweil, which is gives you written word in auditory form, and various things that can help individuals with various kinds of learning disabilities to better ingest the material for their classes. And so we fund through the DSPNS program the High Tech Center training unit at De Anza College that is the leader in the state in terms of teaching, making sure that colleges have state-of-the-art resources and teaching them how to use them. And so they identified some money left at the end of 2012-13 and offered to provide computers and training free of cost to colleges that agreed to dedicate space for a Veterans Resource Center and space and staff. And in 1 year, 15 more colleges set those centers up so that they could get those very small grants. And this is it's kind of a labor of love on every campus where it's something that everyone understands the importance of it and wants to make it work. So that's been very exciting. So we've expanded the number of Veterans Resource Centers around the state dramatically, and every year we now hold a Veterans Summit that has had 200 to 300 people attending it each year, and it's where programs are able to share best practices. We do the veterans mental health training there for faculty and staff who attend, and it's increasingly now, in the first year, there were probably more colleges attending because they wanted to start veterans programs than there were colleges that actually had veterans programs. I think that's now shifted so that the veterans program coordinators use it as an opportunity to share best practices and to learn from each other. And it's been a tremendously successful event, and we'll be doing it again on December 4th and 5th in San Jose if anyone would like to participate. So we're in the process of doing a publication on our veterans programs that we did a report several years ago, but we want to update that and have something available to share with the legislature and for you to use to talk about our programs. And I think that's what I need you to know.
Linda. In addition to your work, I'd like to recognize the support that we've gotten from the foundation, Keith the Mills, and also from the Faculty Association. Jonathan Lightman's here with us this morning. There still needs to be some additional work with articulating military jobs and the work that we do. In addition to that, and then maybe this fits into the career technical education task force work that we have been doing and continue to work on, and that is to really do a better job of linking veterans with programs across the state. As we all recognize, the CTE area, they're varied quite considerably in some regions, or from one region to another, but even within certain regions, the programs vary. And veterans, when they are released from active duty, don't always recognize where there's programs. I guess that the assumption is that community colleges all have the same programs, and that's just not true, particularly when you go to career tech. So, there's still some work that we need to do. I think the summit is a very good vehicle in order to be able to get that information better disseminated and coordinated and help us guide the system. Member Belansky?
I have a request and a question. The request is, in case we've not gotten it, that these two studies that were done in 12, 13, 14 that are being disseminated, if we could get those, I'd really enjoy reading those. And the question is, and I'm not going to be able to say this correctly, but I think you'll get what I'm saying and how we deal with it. Wasn't there a law just currently passed? Can you say more about that and how that's going to be implemented in the state?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. So in the process of adopting federal legislation on veterans health care, Congress included a provision in that bill that says that in order for veterans to utilize their GI education benefits, they must be charged in-state tuition. So this sets up a fairly complicated situation because while we in the community colleges have long supported legislation to enable all veterans to register without paying non-resident tuition in California, that bill has, I think, now been stopped 3 times. And so California law says that it's very prescriptive on who can be exempted from non-resident tuition. Colleges have no discretion in that area. So we're currently required to charge anyone who's not a California resident and doesn't meet specific, for veterans who discharge in California or for veterans who were California residents before they went into the military, they're entitled to resident classification for 1 year so that they can establish California residency. But the issue is veterans who have no prior California connection. And so I'm looking at Vince Stewart, who has been watching AB 13, which I guess is on the governor's desk.
It is. So AB 13 is legislation that's pending before the governor that would request the UC and require the CSU and community colleges to comply with this recent passage of federal law. Now, the federal law, though, is a mandate on the Secretary of the VA to not provide funding for those courses where students don't receive in-state tuition. So I think AB 13 is certainly a step in the right direction, but it is somewhat of a temporary fix because in the next legislative session, we'll need to come in and look at the actual residency requirements that are in state statute and reconcile those to ensure that veterans who are coming back to California, and in this case, veterans who are not necessarily California residents would still qualify for that in-state tuition. So it's a very certainly complicated issue, but I think the federal law and AB 13 are both watershed moments in terms of providing this benefit to veterans and really signaling the support of our institutions of their service.
So the federal law goes into effect in July of 2015. So that gives us some time. I think it's actually generous to say it's a temporary fix. It's actually telling us to do something that we're not allowed to do under state law. So,
well, and there is a commitment, at least in the conversations I've had with legislative staff, that they want to come back in January, do something that would be an urgency measure, recognizing that the federal law kicks in July 1, 2015. So I think what happened is we just ran out of time with this current legislative session to get the more comprehensive fix. So the idea is we'll come back next year and do something that addresses these outstanding issues.
Vince, what has been the issue since it's gone down 3 times? Is it budget?
Good question.
In large part, it's been budget, the loss of revenue, and this was coming at a time when we were going through severe budget cuts, and I think the view was we just couldn't absorb any additional cuts. So I think but I think there have been a lot of issues involved in that conversation, and I think it's only now where we've gotten the political will at the federal level and at the state level to move this forward.
Vice President Baum, and then Member Avalos. You want to defer?
I'll defer.
Member Avalos?
Yeah. So it seems like obviously good work, and it seems like there's a lot more traction going from 13 to 62 centers and a lot more population of veterans coming to the community colleges. I go back to the numbers again. Headcount is up, which is great. But how successful are we in terms of either transferring these veterans or getting them certified in terms of some sort of certificate degree? If I look at the numbers in 2010 to 2011, it's 44,000. Do we have a sense of success for those veterans?
Well, now for the first time, since we have them identified in our MIS system, we will be able to track that for the first time ever. When we simply got a report that gave us the number of benefit recipients, we had no ability to identify them and see what they took, what programs they were in, or anything like that. But now Vice Chancellor Perry will be able to do his magic and be able to tell us all kinds of things about how they progress and where they end up.
Do you mind just repeating one more time the event that's on December 4th and 5th in San Jose? What is that?
In San Jose at the Marriott.
Okay, where is it?
So,
Vice President Mo, go ahead.
first off, thank you for the report, and to also know that 9,000 active duty military are enrolled in California community colleges is very important for us to digest. And just for the newer members, I just remember 4 years or 5 years ago when Member Baca and Member Bobby McDonald pushed the system into focusing on veterans as a strategic priority. And then to see the momentum that generated and seeing the progress that's been made shows when a few of the members of the Board of Governors can highlight a priority, that actual results happen, and that's something. One of the things, though, speaking to Member Budnick, and I remember Member Epstein circulated the article about how the colleges could be a place for students or to realize about access to health care in the new. And in Pasadena, what's happening is that we've all read about the issues about access to VA health care services, and there's been a proposal to create a VA health clinic on a community college campus. And it's a long topic too, but do we think it's a wise path also to see that we can use the community college infrastructure to provide other services like access to health care and things like that? And have we thought about that? And because right now I think they're wrestling with, and very likely to open up a VA health clinic on the campus. I don't know if, Nancy, have you been part of that conversation?
Yeah, they're still working on it, but it looks like it will happen, and the PCC is excited about it, because if you look at logistically where Sepulveda VA, Wadsworth VA, and LA is, and the amount of veterans in that area there, that it's a great resource.
So it's just, again, it's a struggle because it's great, but it also is our system now being called to answer to the needs of people besides their educational needs, which is good. But if we can figure out a way to absorb it, I think it's an exciting prospect.
Veteran Services is one area where there's tremendous potential to link our campuses with community resources, and we've done some work in that regard. But I think that's an area where we can do more to, the county veterans offices in many cases are putting veterans counselors on our campuses to help them access their benefits. So I think that that's exciting. I wasn't aware that was going on in Pasadena. It's very exciting news.
And it's also the awareness that it brings, like what Scott had brought up, from PTSD, MST, or whatever their issues are. It's not just veterans that have had these issues, so it's more that awareness, that education that gets out to the whole infrastructure to just be aware, and I think it's a great opportunity for the educators to learn from it, but if the campus gets it, but there's a lot to it, the logistics, because it's been neat to be a part of that, but it's like bungalows, it's going to be further away, but like what you said, the disability, where a lot of people, or vets, don't want to be classified as disabled, so that's also your other whole, the genre of being labeled a vet, so injured.
Member Van Loon?
Yeah, I just kind of wanted to piggyback on what Member Avalos brought up. I was wondering if we have veterans as a distinct demographic group on our scorecards. Have we disaggregated it to that extent?
They are not disaggregated, but we will have the ability, now that we know who they are, to disaggregate them. Correct,
yeah, I would
Patrick?
love to see that on the student scorecard in the coming months. Once we have all the data, it'd be good to track their outcomes now that we're increasing our numbers.
And in the new requirements around student equity planning, veterans are now singled out as a group that must be measured for disproportionate effects of the programs and services that we provide. So I think that's another way that colleges will pay a lot of attention to their outcomes.
Executive Vice Chancellor Perry, did you want to have something?
Yeah, I wanted to add something. So the fact that we have a new data element that tracks this population, I think, is great. And ultimately, we will have the ability to track that as a distinct subpopulation on scorecards. Know full well that there's a tracking period that has to occur. And I'm not sure if we went back and actually resurveyed all of the existing population at campuses for this, or whether it's a first-time freshman look. Technically, to get a full graduation rate, we're going to have to wait 6 years in order to get that first full veterans grad transfer rate. Other metrics that we more commonly look at, course success rate and fall-to-fall persistence rate, we will be able to look at sooner than that.
Member Sumner?
I would just say, Colin, doesn't Clovis also now have a VA?
Yeah.
That would be number 63 with 113. Because I remember hearing that. I was excited about that.
Yeah, we have a veteran center now, thankfully.
Yeah, see? Clovis, there you go.
Chancellor?
Thank you. We're going to turn our attention to one of the only two things on this agenda that was not envisioned by the strategic plan when it was done, and that was the Community College Baccalaureate. So, Vince, give the board an update on that, please.
Sure, thank you, Chancellor. So, SB 850 is the authorizing language for, or legislation rather, for the Community College Baccalaureate degree, and there's a more thorough summary of that bill in your packet. What I thought I'd do here in the interest of time is really to just briefly give an overview of what that bill would do and then focus specifically on the role of the Board of Governors in implementing that legislation. And I should say that right now it is pending before the governor, so we're still awaiting action on the bill. But sort of in a nutshell, the bill would create a pilot program at 15 community college districts where the district could offer one baccalaureate degree program on each of its campuses. If it's a multi-campus district, or if it's a single campus district, then it would just be that single campus. The programs could not be duplicative of the UC and the CSU, and in fact, we would have to develop and approve and review those programs in consultation with the UC and the CSU. In addition, it's required that the colleges and the districts would need to demonstrate an unmet workforce need, because the idea is that these programs and these degrees would be more on the applied side and would be addressing a specific workforce need that's currently not being met by either of the two four-year institutions. Districts would need to start their programs beginning in the 2017-18 academic year, and the idea is that the programs would then conclude, I think, in 2022-23, with the expectation that you would have two full cohorts moving through these programs, and that would certainly help, I think, with the review and the evaluation. The per unit fees for these programs would still be set by the state legislature. Was something that was very important to us. We wanted to ensure that precedent had not been changed or would not be changed, and you wouldn't have colleges and districts having to set the fees, which in bad years can be very difficult, because now you're faced with having to increase student fees, which is something none of us like to do. In terms of what the bill does do with respect to fees, is it does differentiate that for the upper division coursework, community colleges would charge an additional $84 per unit on top of the $46 that the colleges currently charge for lower division work. In addition, there would be an evaluation of the program by the Department of Finance and the Legislative Analyst Office. And this would look at the effectiveness of this pilot and make some determination and some recommendations going forward as to whether or not we would want to implement this over a long period of time. And then the program, again, would sunset July 1 of 2023. I think, as this legislation moves through the process, and certainly tremendous credit goes to Senator Marty Block, who's the author of the legislation, Constance Carroll, the chancellor at the San Diego Community College District, who has been a champion. But I think there are a number of other folks around our system who have been very supportive of this. I think they pointed to specific programs that are, I think, likely in the queue to move into the baccalaureate degree program. There's been discussion of dental hygiene being one, of industrial technology, allied health, emergency medical technician, and then data management for healthcare. So I think there are a series of programs that are pretty much primed to move into this area. in terms of the role for the Board of Governors, it really is focusing on 3 areas, and one is working with the Chancellor's Office to approve the programs. 2, to develop a funding model and fee structure for the baccalaureate degree programs. And this is a little bit complicated because the legislation requires that to be done by March of 2015, but I think that provision was in prior to the legislature saying that if you're going to do baccalaureate degree programs, you need to do it at the level for which we're funded for lower division coursework currently. So I think we may want to have some conversation about looking at a fee model and structure for this program if it were to go beyond the pilot structure. And then I think lastly, there would be, I think, some value in looking at a more comprehensive evaluation of the baccalaureate degree program beyond what is done by the LAO and the Department of Finance. And I think in large measure, because I think you know, it remains to be seen, 1, there are no resources for either of those agencies to do the evaluation, and 2, it may be beneficial to bring in folks with specific expertise to be able to do that level of work. So, you know, again, I think this is something that, you know, there's been an extensive legislative history around trying to bring the baccalaureate degree program to the community colleges. There were at least 3 or 4 bills starting in the 2010 legislative session that moved through but did not, were ultimately not successful. And there's also precedent in terms of other states where I think we've got 20-plus states that are currently having community colleges offer the baccalaureate degree. And I would just close that I think, you know, the notion here is not to, I think, go beyond the original vision of the master plan set out in 1960, but I think is more of a recognition that the state of California has changed, its demographics have changed, its economy certainly has changed, and there is really a need for the state to look at and examine how can it meet the needs of students and meet the needs of industry and the workforce. So,
I would just add a postscript. We'll be coming back to the board, assuming the governor signs this, with a much more robust conversation. This is a significant mission shift for our system, and one of which we have been supportive, but it has tremendous implications. And I think it's premature for us to get into a robust conversation prior to the governor making a decision one way or the other. But if he signs this thing, you can be rest assured we'll be back with a much more full conversation.
Member Solano?
Yeah, Vice Chancellor Stewart, a couple of questions. Maybe I'll just rattle them off first. One is, do we have a sense already who those 15 districts might be and what the balance is between urban and rural? Second, the programs that have been identified, the 5 that you list out, how did you guys arrive at that, or how did that list get generated? And then third, maybe to Vice Chancellor Ton Quinlivan, do we imagine, and Chancellor Harris, that there'll be an interface between CTE and this, because it seems like that is the intersection of how we're going to develop what would be the BAs allowed. So just
sure.
However order you want to answer those 3.
No, I'll take them in order that
Okay.
you presented them. In terms of the 15, we don't yet have a breakout versus urban versus rural. I think we've got districts who have been very active in the conversation around the baccalaureate degree, so I think certainly San Diego Community College District. There's been some discussion. I think Foothill De Anza is another. Okay. You know, I think it remains to be seen. One, the governor actually needs to sign the bill into law. But I think there will be a lot of interest across the system, and I think there will be many more than the 15 that are written into the legislation. But I think the feeling was that this was a good first step, and to sort of demonstrate the proof of concept with respect to this proposal. In terms of which disciplines, I mean, the idea is really to look at those disciplines that are more applied in nature. The 5 that are listed here, we're looking at where do colleges currently have some capacity and the resources and the ability in terms of existing programs, faculty. For instance, with the case of dental hygiene, which is a program at Foothill, my understanding is that to move from the associate's degree to the baccalaureate degree is really the addition of 2 or 3 additional courses. So I think they were looking at where can you really make that additional step and not overburden the institution, not detract from the core mission of transfer of basic skills of workforce prep. And then to your last question, the focus on, or the interface between the academics and workforce preparation, I think, is front and center with this proposal. The idea was you have regions of the state where, for whatever reason, the UC, the CSU, or other four-year institutions are not providing these baccalaureate degrees. So it's how can we step in and fill that void? And that needs to be demonstrated by the colleges actually doing a scan and seeing where's their unmet need. And I think also it's looking at underserved populations. In many instances, you have populations that don't have access to the UC or the CSU campus or other campuses. So it's really factoring that in as well.
I made just a couple follow-ups. So it can't be a BA that's offered by a CSU or a UC across the state, or just in that region? That was the part I'm not clear on.
Right. So the way the legislation is written, it's across the state.
The whole state. Okay.
But I know that there have been some conversations with individual campuses and with the chancellor's office to see if there's some way of easing that a bit, recognizing that you may have a program that's offered at Humboldt, that there is significant need in the Central Valley or Imperial County.
Right.
And does it really make sense to say we're not going to offer that because you have one CSU campus that offers that degree? So I think that'll be part of the back and forth in the conversation that we need to have with the UC and the CSU, since this really does need to be done in consultation with them. And quite honestly, I commend them because they've been supportive of this effort. I think they recognize that there's historical precedent in terms of the CSU getting independent authority to grant the education doctorate, and in many respects the arguments were the same in that other institutions weren't fulfilling that need. So I think this really is about serving students and serving students in a way that they're going to get degrees and credentials that will help them get jobs.
My last follow-up, I promise, is so in determining the programs that are selected, so the Board of Governors has a role in approving the 15?
Yes.
And do we have the authority to set standards related to the programs coming forward as having to have had a comprehensive regional strategy behind them from an economic development or workforce perspective? Can we set some gates that folks will have had to pass through to show that they've done this in collaboration with industry leaders and with economists in the region, so we know it's a comprehensive scan? Do we have the authority to kind of set the standards when we consider which ones to approve?
Right. So the legislation.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, Vince. Let me caution all of us. I really, those questions that you're asking are hitting at the sweet spot of what this board is going to have to undertake, assuming the governor signs this. And even in getting into listing some of the sample degrees makes me extremely nervous. Okay. So it's not that I want to cut the conversation off. It's that I'd like to get the governor's signature, and then I'd like for us to have this conversation in a lot more detail.
Okay, fair enough.
Okay. Member Avalos, do you want to back off? Okay, Member Budnick.
Sorry, at the Board of Corrections, we don't raise our hands, so we're just used to talking over each other. So it's nice to be back in a civilized room. Prognosis: how are we feeling about the bill? Any huge opposition other than the faculty?
No, and I don't want to minimize the views of the faculties. I'm looking over at the chair of the Academic Senate. I think they've raised some very legitimate concerns. I think the prognosis is generally pretty good. There's quite a bit of support, and so I don't want to sort of count my chickens before they hatch. So I'll probably stop there.
Okay. If there are no other questions, then Chancellor.
Thank you very much. Let me ask Bon Ton Quinlivan to talk with you a bit about AB 86 and adult education.
Thank you, Chancellor. Well, I'm just chomping at the bits, waiting for our lunchtime conversation, because many of the things that you said has tentacles into that conversation. But we have so many weighty issues between now and then, one of which is adult education called AB 86, transition planning. So we gave you a briefing last year when we were all in the Central Valley, hosted by Frank Gornick over in West Hills. And it's time to update you on where the progress of that program is. So if you remember, last year, the governor wanted to clear the way for the local control funding formula. And in doing so, he wanted to clear out anything that was not youth focus out of the K-12 budget. And one of those was the adult education set of programs. Now, this set of programs, they were devastated in the last few years from flexibility. So they, on the K-12 side, it went from $900 million program down to $300 million. And as you know, from all the data you've read, the need is tremendous. So, you know, remember, Budnick, you raised the question. It's like, whose responsibility is it, right, to serve? And so here's a situation where we are working with the K-12 institutions in order to create the conditions for the state to increase its investment into the low-skilled adult population of our state, because we know it's important. But it is a very complex process with two big systems that needs to learn to dance together intimately. It's like bringing two big clans together. So just so you remember that if we're successful, the implied promise is that there will be new monies that would go to fund these consortia of providers. This is new money, not taking away any old money. So in phase one, our objective was, as prescribed by the language of the budget, we needed to form consortia between the community colleges and the K-12 providers, and the measurement of success was, could we get 100% coverage of the state through these consortia? And it was a miracle, but we were able to form the 70 consortia. It would have been 72, but some of the colleges and the K-12 providers decided to group together instead of, you know, staying in the college footprint. So we ended up with 70 consortia of providers. In phase two, which is the period that we're in now, the consortia are on the ground doing planning. And so part of their planning is asking them to assess what is their region's need, what are the current services being provided, what are the current costs, and we're beginning to do a roll-up of the plans that they are submitting. And thanks to those plans, we're also creating a summit that is coming up in October, which is bringing together these consortia that includes both the faculty and the instructors from both systems, as well as the leadership from each of these consortia from both sides of the house, in order to look at strategies. What are the best practice strategies on closing the gap in their respective plans? So that's what's happening on the ground. So now in phase two, we have on-the-ground planning that is happening. And then at the state level, we still need to harmonize these 70 regional consortia, because if you can imagine, a student can move from one region to another, and it shouldn't be a jarring experience. So what are the common assessments between all of these consortia and gateways, knowing that we need to tie it into our common assessment work? What is the funding formula in which that all these consortia would be paid? And then what is the accountability system that should be shared between these systems? So these are massive questions. And coming soon, we will be sending Dan Troy, as well as a set of experts, equal numbers from both sides of the system, to come together and really do some work on the fiscal model as one of the next big steps. So there's on-the-ground work that's happening and state-level work that is happening. And, you know, I think it's easy because there's 70 consortia, as you can imagine, with very different personalities. You know, anywhere you go, you can sort of map them out in terms of maturity and sophistication. But let me just give you just two examples of promising consortia development. Member Belansky had brought this up. In his Peralta district, they submitted a good plan. They apparently already have good sets of data system that could be shared amongst the providers, from the local workforce investment systems to the libraries to the career academies to the county offices to the employers. So they have already begun laying the groundwork on some of the data collection. Where they really want to work together is how to contextualize English as a second language and literacy into their CTE pathways. So that's the big gap that they're communally working to focus on. In LA, there's some good developments and very complex community, as you can imagine, but in the planning process, they brought together the chambers and surveyed all the students. They did listening sessions of the partners, and they identified 8 areas where they wanted to close the gap. Number 1 was class capacity. Number 2 was to map all the wraparound and support services that are needed by this particular community. So I think if we had not been challenged to take on this role, perhaps none of these conversations would have manifested. And this is not to say this is an easy task, because the need is great, the dollars are very little, but if we don't begin this process, there's no way that the state would increase its investment. So we're guiding this process in a way where, again, I think the goal is, can we establish the credibility enough so that the state is willing to add dollars and begin investing in the low-skilled populations of our state?
Yeah, this is really important work. You know, when societies and systems are put under stress, things fall through the crack, among other things. And, you know, one of the things that we recognized during the early part of the recession, and with the flexibility that was being available to districts throughout the state K-12, adult learners were slowly being moved out. So we needed to have a statewide policy with regard to adult learners. And we did evolve through it. Created a little bit of friction between the K-12 and the community colleges. But ultimately, what's being done here is really probably the approach that was needed. So the outcome of this hopefully will result in a better cooperation that will lead to greater access to those adult learners that were being slowly, and not so slowly maybe, moved out from any opportunities to education of any type. So really important work. Are there any questions of the Vice Chancellor? Chancellor?
Let's try to slip one more in before lunch. Patrick, you're on point here. You're the only thing standing between these folks and a piece of pizza.
You know that's a prompt for quickness. Okay, so institutional effectiveness is a newly funded program in 14-15. This was really a Governor's and Department of Finance initiative. They graciously provided the agency 9 new bodies, which is a pretty significant influx, and also a $2.5 million annual categorical funding augmentation to run this program. The focus of this is to create a very robust technical assistance infrastructure. And the infrastructure and the assistance would be focused in 4 primary areas: campus and district accreditation health, fiscal health, student performance, and compliance with state and federal mandates and regulations. It's not limited to that, but those are the areas that we're going to start off by focusing on. It'll have a number of different layers to it. At the top, you'll have the Chancellor's Office, who received some of these new bodies. It will have a new division devoted to it, so we will now have a Vice Chancellor of Institutional Effectiveness who will be coming on in a couple of weeks, and a small staff underneath that. The main function of that at the Chancellor's Office is to really oversee the policies and procedures of technical assistance, who gets it, identifying district performance and struggling colleges, creating a dashboard of all of these metrics to identify who we might want to go provide technical assistance to. The grant, which is the $2.5 million Prop 98 augmentation, will be competitively bid out, and a district will run this. In fact, this is actually going out later on today. They will do more of the nitty-gritty work of assembling content experts. These will be folks who are identified and vetted by the district. And when a campus or a district is identified as receiving technical assistance, we will have a cadre of experts to call upon where needed. They may be, singular to a particular topic, or a broad variety of knowledge that we may send folks out. We may send small teams out or large teams, depending on the topic or the severity of it. Ultimately, those teams of content experts will assemble, meet at the campuses, do site visits. The district will coordinate all of that travel, and they will complete reports with sets of recommendations on how we might solve problems at the district or help them out. Ultimately, I'd say the ultimate goal of this is to be much more proactive in our view of technical assistance and keeping districts and campuses in good health. And as we know, being reactive is not a good place to be. So this was one of the goals that was really enforced upon us by finance and the governor, that ultimately we wish to be very proactive in our view of this. Okay?
So will this allow the system to have tools then when we see a district falling out of compliance or best practices, rather than wait for accreditation or other processes?
That would be one of the primary goals. We want to take a look at some of these metrics or status changes long before they might trigger some ACCJC sanction. I think getting the number of colleges that we have on the level of sanctions that they're on is a primary goal.
So will there be some mechanisms that this Board of Governors might be empowered to use, so when we see a district falling out of compliance, that there might be something that we can compel them to do so that?
Yes.
The only addition I would make to that is when we were setting this up and proposing it to the administration, I think their initial thought was that it would be only for districts that were in severe trouble. We really impressed upon them the belief that we didn't want districts that utilize this to feel as if they had a scarlet letter on their forehead, and that in fact, in the best of all worlds, on down the road, this would best serve districts who identify they're having difficulty and can come to the Chancellor's office to support that. So we, as Patrick said, will start off focused on the institutions that are experiencing fiscal or accreditation or regulation challenges. But we really do want this ultimately to be available to all districts to improve their performance.
Member Belansky.
On page 1 of the report that was in the binder, the third bullet there says, as a part of the technical assistance process, districts and colleges will be required to complete and submit self-studies and/or improvement plans. Is there any sense of what that would look like? Is it done on an annual basis? Will there be a template to fill in? I'm just curious because, I mean, it does create another level of work, particularly if this is going to get to be really intense in terms of like writing this up, finding the people. I'm not against it. I'm just saying, you know, that has that been factored into what this will look like in terms of, that's my first question.
I would say a lot of this is TBD.
That's right.
It's up to the board and this new division to figure out what they want to do.
Because I think that will be critical as to what that looks like and what the colleges are expected to do and who gets to do it, just the workload issues with less staff these days. And not that I'm against it. The other thing is it talks about sending site visit teams. Would the cost of the site visit teams come out of the $2.5 million?
It is anticipated, yes.
Okay. And the only reason I ask is, I mean, we used to do site visits for categorical programs. We would do for DSPNS and EOPS and on down the line, but when the money fell out, then those visits just stopped. So, you know, that's my question, you know, that there will always be money, so to speak, to pay for these visiting teams to go and provide that technical assistance.
Member Avalos?
Yeah, thank you for the update. So when will this be available? When's this going to start coming up for fruition in terms of hiring people, and when we start seeing, you know, the next strategy around us?
The first two steps are employing the 9 positions and the Vice Chancellor. We have the Vice Chancellor employed and the 9 positions. Are they all posted? Not quite? Some of them, not all?
Some yes, some no. It's anticipated that they should all be filled by the end of the calendar year.
And then, as Patrick said, the RFP for the $2.5 million technical assistance college is on the streets today?
That is correct. Anticipated that an award would be made by the November BOG meeting.
So what we are doing is pushing as hard as we can, because we'd like to begin to have some deliverables as soon after the first of the year as possible, because It won't surprise anybody, no, we're going back to the administration to ask for additional resources on top of the $2.5 million to ramp up the technical assistance. So the sooner the better in terms of supporting our colleges and also making a case for furthering this.
Vice President Bond.
My last comment would be just when City College of San Francisco started getting into trouble, a couple of their trustees came and the president of their board said, I wish somebody had told us that accreditation was such an important issue that the boards need to be aware of. And my hope is that we undertake a very proactive communication campaign to local districts and boards to know that these standards are being developed and that there's a technical assistance team that will also be evaluating individual districts and then providing tools for access. That's part of that process so that no district, no board member or administrator up and down the state can be in the dark about that this is going to be something that they're going to be engaged with.
Member Sovner.
I was going to say, especially like 2 years out, it would be nice to have that 2 years out from your inspection, like we would say in the military. So you have an awareness, what resources, what do we need, what best practices are out there, how can we network and be success? You know, the old days are definitely long gone, and I'm not going to share mine with you. But I mean, that would be, when I was looking at these dates, I'm like, okay, in my, area, who's coming due, so I'm thinking, this would be a great opportunity, what resources they need, how can we help, as a board to go out to them just as representation and say, hey, we're here, your eyes and ears for you too.
There are also some indicators that we will pay a lot of attention to. If you look at the history of colleges that are experiencing sanction, the commission will tell you often you see right before that process turnover of leadership at a whole lot of levels in the institution, and then you wonder why when it comes time for evaluation the self-study's not done right and the college isn't ready. So we will have the ability to watch some of those indicators and hopefully identify and get out ahead of some of these. And as was the mention with City College of San Francisco, that was one of the things that helped the administration and the Department of Finance and the legislature understand that it's far better to get ahead of these than it is to have to deal with them after they've fallen out.
Very good. If there are no other comments or questions, we'll take a 45-minute lunch break, pick up with accreditation right after the break.
Thanks.
I forgot I was going to bring something.